Amber Bonsall is on science staff as an analyst here in Green Bank. She was originally an operator of the telescope, so she has a lot of knowledge about all of these systems. And for the next 45 minutes, will talk to us about CLEO. Take it away, Amber.
Okay, let's see if I can get my screen to share here. All right, are you guys able to see that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so as Larry kind of already showed you briefly, we're going to cover CLEO. CLEO stands for Control Library for Engineers and Operators. So there are a lot of features in here. I'll show you some, but a lot of them you won't need because it's mostly what the operators will be using. So in order to open it, all you do is just type CLEO. There is also the capability of typing in CLEO and then the individual app. But for the time being, it's probably easier to just type CLEO, and then in that case, this launcher will come up. You can click the launch, or you can click anywhere in this yellow box and the drop down will come up. Move that up there. And if you close certain things, it won't, if you close this, it doesn't close everything. So if you accidentally close the launcher, you don't have to worry about all of your apps closing. So the first window we'll go over is the most general one, and that is called status. And so that's the third one down. So now the thing I'll note about the status window, it is very computing heavy. So I'm going to show you a function later that lets you open multiple windows in or multiple tabs inside of one box. So like if you're like me right now and you're on a laptop, you don't have as much space. So you can open a bunch of apps in like one window so you can use them. However, this one I would suggest you don't do that with. It will tend to make everything else lag out. I always open status as its own window. And it does take, as you can see, a while to actually open up. So don't like freak out if it doesn't load. It can be very slow. Okay. So the status window is essentially compiling all the different CLEO apps into one useful screen for you as an observer. The operators don't really use this because they need to see more details than what's here. But we will go over what everything on here is, and then what some of the other apps that you want to use within CLEO are. So you can see you have, again, a launch thing up here, but you don't really need to worry about that, but it is there in case you can't find your launcher window. So the first thing you're going to see is the status and the state. And these are mirroring from Astrid. So if I had Astrid open, which I don't right this second, you'd be able to see that these are the exact same as they are in Astrid. And when you see error, if you ever log into the GBT and your status says clear or there's no warning there, I'd be concerned and ask the operator. There's pretty much always some form of error. The difference is that the error, it may say, like in this case, you see error for an antenna right below it. And there's a small message window down here that we'll cover then. But in most cases, there's always some kind of small error in the background. It's the question of whether it's going to affect your observing or not. And in most cases, if it is, the operator is going to tell you that. They're not just gonna, they're paying attention when you start. They're making sure everything is clear. But if you do have a question, you can just ask the operator. But in most cases, if you don't, you're always going to see a warning or an error when you log in as the status. It's if you see a big red fatal that you should be very concerned if you see fatal, because that's not good. That is definitely that there's a problem. But the operator will also see it, and they will most likely catch it before you do. So then state is currently, it says running because somebody is running the GBT. So right below this, it's mirroring something called the scan coordinator, which is showing every device that's being used while your scripts are being submitted, and then it tells you what the state is. So in most cases, these will say ready. When you're submitting, it will say activating and then running. So this is kind of what the operators kind of quickly their quick check, like once you've started and you're going for a while, they'll want to, they're still watching, but they're not staring at the screen. They want to make sure all of these lights are green, and that's pretty much what they're checking for. And more than likely, Vegas is going to be the one that might cause a problem, or sometimes the antenna won't enable. But again, the operator will probably catch that before you do, but sometimes you might catch it before they see it. We have an LST clock and a UTC clock up here, just to help you with the time, since we have a separate app for that, but might be harder to see your time, local time, or the UTC time. And then below this is essentially, this is also the scan coordinator app, which so what it's going to do is this information might be wrong until you start, like until your first script actually submits. So right now we can see that whoever is currently running, which is Michael Bush, we can see what source, what scan number, what the project with the session number is, what the switching master is, what time they started, and the length of their scan. So when you submit a scan, it will usually go into countdown. And when you see the countdown, what it's actually doing is not guessing. It's preparing all of these. That's when you'll see these all go yellow. And that's the time it's saying it's going to take for all of these to turn green. So you'll see a countdown here. And then once your scan has actually started and you're taking data, you'll see it here in the remaining window. So you can see this scan has a remainder of 6 minutes and 20 some seconds left. Underneath that, it tells you who's observing. Okay, so sorry, there's a cat crying on the floor. I'm sorry if there's random animals that just appear or start making noise. So Michael Bush is the current observer. So you can see this even when obviously you're not the observer. And again, don't panic if your name doesn't show up at first. Most of the time it doesn't reset until until you're taking your first scan. And then underneath that, it'll tell you, like, are you doing spectral line? You're doing pulsar. It tells you what kind of scan you're doing. Is it track or an on-off? It tells your sequence and your switching. And then it has like your rest frequency, and like your velocity or your velocity definition, which I think Larry kind of went over that with you. So right below that, there is another little section. This is a different app. This is actually compilation of 2 apps. I think this is the antenna control and the weather app combined. So this green block will tell you when you're on source. So most of the time you'll see it say slewing. It might say, boom retracting, boom extending. So this tells you what you're doing. And right now they're obviously on source because they're actually, taking data. This box here will tell you if that there is an e-stop that is pushed on this is physically on the antenna. There's like more than a dozen probably e-stops, obviously, in case there's an emergency. If that light's on, that means somebody's on the telescope and somebody's pushed it. So you usually are not going to see that unless you start right after a maintenance day or something like that. And then underneath here are where your corrections are going to show up. So here's your as correction, your L correction, and then this one here, the Y, will be your focus correction. And you always want to check to make sure after you've done your pointing and focus that those show up. There is a way in Astra to submit those. You can also just ask the operator can see everything you're doing. And if these don't go in, like they just appear as 0 or they don't match, the operator can put them in for you as well. If you are not, I don't remember if Larry covered how to put those in or not, but you can put those in yourself or have the operator do it. And the operator's watching, they might just do it for you without, you even having to tell them. So configure mode is telling you, so you'll always see this model, well, it might not always be this, but model latest is always going to be spectral line, and then there's a different one for pulsars. And the operator changes this in between observations if the type of observation changes. You can see your coordinate mode, and then guiding is just what the antenna is kind of doing right now. So this bar down here is kind of mirroring the weather icon or weather app. So this bar here is telling you wind speed. And then actually over here, you can reset these. It will default to Celsius and meters per second, but unfortunately I'm going to have to change it because I can't figure them out otherwise. But so it's going to give you this bar, and so you'll see these little triangles, and if you hover over them, it will tell you what everything is. And the important things to look at are the triangles usually, and most likely this top triangle here. So the top triangle is telling you what the wind speeds are at the top of the GBT. There's a weather station at the very top, and that's the speeds the operator is most likely looking at to see, because we do have wind restrictions. There is it's a small thing up at the top that can blow back and forth. So you'll always see this orange and this red. The orange will always be at 35 miles per hour. And that's if the operator starts to see a sustained gust of wind that's lasting, they'll give you a warning, and then usually they'll tell you, okay, we have to stop because the telescope is not and needs to be moved to a safe position. And if it hits above 40, they're definitely going to stop you right away and be like, all right, we got to park the telescope. And then they wait they have to go 15 minutes without getting an alarm before they'll let you continue observing. And that all gets logged, so you don't lose that time. You just are not going to get it during that session. You'll have to get it back at a later date. And then most of the time, or not most of the time, depending on what receiver you're using, there might also be a bright yellow bar in here. For L-band, there isn't, because L-band's beam is big enough. We're not worried about it. The telescope can't drift enough that it's gonna, these are more for like mechanical safety. The yellow bar is more of your observation safety. So L-band, we don't worry about it. It doesn't drift enough that you would lose your source from the wind. However, things like Argus, I think Argus is, well, you'll see a yellow thing like all the way down to like 5 or 10. And that's pretty much saying that, it's not saying you can't be observing. There is just gusts of wind that might be causing some issues, and you want to definitely carefully check your data at that point to make sure that the wind isn't affecting it. And if it is, you do have the option to say to the operator, if they haven't stopped you, that your data doesn't look good and that you want to concede your time for weather purposes. Again, that will be logged. You won't lose that time. You'll get it back. But we don't want you to just try to sit there and force yourself to observe if your data is not good, because you can't control the weather, and neither can we. So, you can always talk to the operator. They put all this in their logs and everything. But that's, again, for higher frequencies, and you'll see the yellow line. Some of you will probably see it later tonight, depending on what receivers you use. And then down here, you can see the temperature. If the temperature drops below 17 degrees Fahrenheit, we go into what we call half rate mode, which means the telescope will move at half its normal speed, which really isn't a problem unless you're observing up towards the zenith or the keyhole, because we have what we call the keyhole, which is the telescope can only move so fast. And so if your source passes through that keyhole, the telescope can't turn fast enough to keep up. And that's it. We usually don't let you observe above like 80 elevation, usually maybe like 85 or so. And we don't let you go below 5, but that's for other reasons. So if you see the temperature is close to that, there's a good chance at some point you're going to be stopped. The operator will usually tell you if you're already in half rate. There's also a fault that will show up in the message window to let you know that that they're in half rate. And then if it goes below 0, everything, or I think it's, below -10, everything gets shut down entirely. The telescope the grease and oil inside the telescope can't cope with those temperatures. So the telescope will be parked until it reaches above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And that can happen quite a bit in the winter, mostly during night observing, but we'll also stop for, excuse me, for like heavy snow or ice. So if the operator, if it's, even if you're doing low frequency observations, if there's snow on the dish or it's building up on the dish, we don't want too much heavy stuff sitting on our sensitive dish. So the operator might have to stop you if, the weather, the snow or anything is bad enough that it's going to cause, build up on the dish or something that might affect the dish for like later observations. And so they'll usually, again, you'll get that time back, but they'll tell you that, you can stop for now, and they'll either try to dump the snow off the dish or whatever. But rain doesn't usually stop, won't usually stop in observations. It's snow or wind or something that will stop your observations. Sorry again. So underneath here, I guess I should mention this. So this is it's not super useful to you. It's called the sky view. And like I said, CLEO is for the operators and the engineers. So this was particularly designed for the operators, whereas as observers, you care about looking up at the sky. The operator cares about they're worried about the telescope, so they're looking down on the dish. So in this case, this is actually a downward view, as if you were looking down onto the dish. And the operator can see the sun. And again, the little thing will come up and tell you what everything is. But they can see, wind, and they'll see where the telescope is. But this one's not as useful to you because it's looking down on the telescope. I'm going to open the sky view, which I think Larry opened. I don't remember if he did or not, but I think he mentioned it at least. And that one's the more useful one for you to use. Over here, you'll see a mirror of what's called the antenna control app, or the other part of the antenna control app. And this will tell you where your azimuth and elevation are. It tells you what where it is and where it's been commanded to. So if it's moving, it's this might say something different. I will actually open something real quick here just because you don't normally see it. And this is the antenna app that is being mirrored from, but you don't necessarily have to have this open. The only reason I ever open it is when I first start. Those pictures in the way. This operators obviously have this open, but again, this is more information than you need, so you don't necessarily have to open this. But I use it in the beginning usually just to check this AS wrap. So we have a wrap on the telescope for how it spins, and it's kind of like a nautilus shell. So there's certain places where you can be at the same azimuth, but the number will be completely different. So the only time that this is concerning is if you're very close to here or here. If your source is going to get pushed off the ends here, the operator will have to unwrap the telescope, which means that if this is the equivalent of this, it's going to take 10 minutes for it to go from one point on the wrap to the other. So this is usually a good thing to have to check, and the operator will also always usually check it because again, they have this open. And it's probably better in most cases to do this beforehand at the beginning of your observation and not at the end of your observation or in the middle of your observation, because you don't want to be doing an on scan and then your off scan or whatever has to be, you have to wait 10 minutes for it. So it's best to always check this beforehand. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here that's more relevant to the operators, but here's the mirroring of that other app in the status window. But you can also tell where you are by so obviously we're not like anywhere near 450 or minus 90. So this isn't, you can kind of also tell from here. And I'll show you how to tell with the Skyview app as well. There's a way to tell in there. There's a way to kind of tell in there. Down here, there's always going to be 3 tabs. Devices is showing you the path that you're, like what filters you're using, what receiver you're using, what switches and what Vegas pathways you're using. So this is kind of good information to be able to see. And so that way, like also if there's a power issue, you can see like if all these say 0, you know there's something wrong. So that's just kind of like a quick check for you. Here's your IF paths, like the DCR and Vegas. These will change depending on which ones you're using. And then, like I said, this is the message window. And this is the message window that is probably better for you to use because, so this will only really show you things that are affecting your current observation. The operators, again, I'm going to open this the operators open this message window. And this is a smaller version of this. So this is the operator's message window, which is showing them errors for everything, even the things not being used. So if you're the people observing now with L-band, obviously they don't care about the Argus faults. So if you notice, none of those Argus faults are showing up here. So this is the message window you should really be concerned with. You can look at the other one if you really want to, but you're going to see a lot of errors. There's also, if you come in and there's no faults here at all, but you see that it says error, it's more than likely that there's an error on the fact that Argus is throwing up this orange error is going to push that into and cause that to say error, even if you're not using it. So if you're really concerned, you just always can ask the operator, and they'll let you know. But I wouldn't worry about that message window. I would just keep an eye on this one, and you'll always get this scan coordinate. As your scans are going, it always tells you. So there's always at least like one fault in here, or a warning, or whatever you want to call it. All right. So are there any questions about the status window? Let's try to see if I can see. Okay, I can't figure out how to let it show me the chat window.
None in the chat right yet, Amber.
Okay, thank you, Will. All right, so the CLEO launcher. So a lot of these are just, like I said, the bigger apps. You can log in and look at them. Unless you have access through the operator, you can't change many of these things. There is something down here called simulation mode that will allow you to open things up, and you can play with buttons, but won't affect the real telescope. But the problem is a lot of the values just say 0, so you can't really, like, it's not a perfect simulator, but it does let you go through and play with things if you really want to without affecting. But then you have to click it off again if you want to use it in real-time mode. So again, most of these you don't need. These are all operators. If you're ever curious, your receivers are all here. But again, these are not things that you will usually ever open. Some people open the Vegas backend, which I can show you now, assuming you're using Vegas. At some point it'll open. So this is the Vegas backend control screen. Again, I can't do anything to it because I am not in the gateway at this particular moment, but it shows you all 8 of our banks. It tells you what mode each one is in, their bandwidth. You can see down here if they're running, whoever's running now is only using bank A and it is running. And so then there's these numbers on the side here, and these are what the operators are also looking at to for you to make sure that everything looks good. I tend to open this, but again, this might be my operator preference because this is a window the operators open. And I tend to like, that just looks like a lot of numbers to me, and my brain doesn't entirely see that the way it probably should. So if you want a more visual version, you can open this window, which will show you both polarizations as they, for each bank. And so as you can see, only bank A is really being used. And these values should be about between plus or minus minus 20. If it's jumped up to something else, the operators were usually paying attention. So it shouldn't be like minus 45 or something. That's in most cases, if something's wrong, it'll read minus 45. And again, you can see that this bank is the only one being used. Another check if you think something is wrong is you can click on the individual banks, and that'll show you again this chart here. But what it also shows you is these ADC power levels. And so if the essentially the width of this should always be between minus 50 and positive 50. If it's a straight line, that means there's no power going to that particular polarization, and so something is wrong. Or if it's super huge, there's too much power. So you kind of see it's more for people who are more visual, like me. I tend to use this window instead of this other one over here. However, the other one over there will show you if there's a fault on an individual bank. It'll tell you which bank, if a bank has errored, it'll tell you which bank has errored, etc. And you can change these. I would not suggest manually changing these while you're observing. You should always use the asterisk script to do that. It's for more advanced users to go through, and actually some people will go through and change these themselves, but I would not suggest that you do that at this time. All right. Just make sure there's no other back ends. There's the breakthrough listen back end and the DCR, which I won't go over now unless we have time. So there's the operators list. So the gateway is what they're going to put you in when you request observing. So you don't need to open it. I mean, we can open it. You're not gonna know the password because I just remember it from being an operator. I still can't do anything because I don't have control, but I can at least open it. And so this is saying, so here's the person who's currently observing. They have access to the antenna. The operators always have access, so they're always in there. And then obviously our MON control system. And then down here you can see one of our observers, Simon, he does Mustang observations. And so he doesn't have the ability to control the antenna at all. He only has the ability to control Mustang. So when you're observing, you always use the computer's Titania and aerial. And so this is how they'll give you access. So like you'll be able to see, like if I look for myself in here. Yes, they have to scroll through all the names to find you. So there's me. They would say, I always pick aerial. And I can't do it because I don't have any control. But then they'll put you in here. Once they've done that, then they'll select, down here, they'll select your antenna and antenna manager and stuff. And once they've done that, and they'll tell you you've done that, you won't be able to know. that's when you'll be able to take control of the telescope at that time. So sometimes they'll do that first, sometimes they'll wait until the very end. But that's just for your information. That's what the gateway looks like. And then there's a bunch of other things in here for them that are not very useful for you. We have scheduler and Skyview, which I think Larry talked about, right? Yeah. So when you open scheduler and Skyview, the first thing it's going to pop up is going to look like this, and it's going to be in schedule mode. Schedule mode is not tracking where the telescope currently is, nor does it care. If you want to see where the telescope is, you have to remember to click real time. And that will actually move the telescope to where it is and show you everything as it is now. However, scheduling is useful because it allows you to determine what sources are going to be up during your observations. So you can go down here, you can decide what's going to be able to be seen. I'll explain to you how to upload a catalog in a minute. But you can see there's a change date and time, there's change as an L position, then there's also change galactic. So in most cases, you're just going to change this. So we'll just use today, and we can say, I don't know, and there's also a now button. And then you have to make sure you hit the accept date time in order to get it to actually change. And so now you can see that the view has actually changed. And so what you're seeing here is obviously you can see we have the planet labels on and stuff. So the black circle, obviously that's the north celestial pole. And the black circle is telling you that the object you're currently observing, that's the path it's going to take. So if your black circle goes like that, that's telling you that this is rise to set. So that's, it'll show you this big circle that allows you to kind of see what path so you can see if it's going to pass in the keyhole or not, that type of stuff. And then this is the galactic center is the red line. And then the pink crosshairs here are actually, you'll see that change from time to time. So that's where the telescope is. So when you're changing sources or when it's moving, this will show that it's moving, and it will actually send a crosshairs down to wherever, let's say you're observing down here. The crosshairs will move, and you can actually watch the circle move towards the crosshairs as you're moving. And again, the black line and everything will adjust. And you can zoom in and zoom out here. You can, clear what you have there. And if you want to see, like if your source is over here or you're looking for something specific, you can actually see then, I'm trying to point and I guess that doesn't really help, but you can see in the bottom that it's showing you what the right ascension declination as L or the galactic, it's telling you exactly what the all optional coordinate systems where your mouse is at that time. And if you have a specific source picked out, which it doesn't work because I don't have a catalog loaded right now, but I guess I can do that quick. Whoops, not that. So under catalog, you'll get this window. You just pick add select catalog. So you'll see we have a bunch of catalogs here that already exist, usually for pointing or for your flux calibrator. You can click on it. And then you can change the color if you want. Some people don't want them all to be the same color. So you can change whatever color you want. And then by clicking apply, that will now change in this window, will now list all of those sources. And as you can tell, they've now all showed up on the screen. And you can also add a user's catalog. So once you've created your own catalog, you can essentially load a personal catalog and your own sources will show up. And I can actually probably. So now my catalog's here. I'll change it to pink. I guess my source is not up. So that wasn't super helpful, but, oh wait, there we go, ha. So now you can see in pink, my source is now shown up and it will move. You can do this increment moving by an hour or so, and you can see, so if you start observing at this time and you want to see where you'll be in 3 hours, I can see that in 3 hours, my source would have set that, my pink source. And so we'll close that. And then to go with that, you can also, like, let's say you're looking for a flux calibrator or something, and there's too many here. You don't want to see that. You don't want to see ones with one. You want to see a minimum of 5. So you can start changing this to get things to more of a range that you want for you, and look for things that are close. Like I can see there's no flux calibrators near this one right now. But you can add other catalogs or look for your own if you need to. Actually, I guess now So if you click on, sorry, click on, I gotta find one that's actually up. So if you click on it in this window, it will actually move to that. The telescope's not actually there. It's just, it's again, we're in schedule mode. So it's doing that for you. So you can actually highlight over the source, and then you'll see in the top, it tells you the source and its right ascension declination, but then the last number it's telling you is actually its intensity. So we can see that this is a very bright source. So you can actually look to see if your source, if the flux calibrator or whatever you want to use is going to be bright enough or not. It also lists them all in this catalog over here. So there's a lot of information in here that's very useful for you while you're observing and before you're observing. Observing files, it's not really nothing. I've never even used that. I'm not entirely sure what it's for. But then you can see like move time. So like while the telescope is moving, if it's moving from one place to another, it'll tell you how long is it going to take to get there, and stuff like that. And then you can turn on whatever coordinate systems you want. Or I usually just don't put a grid system on at all. Oh, and then how you tell, kind of how you tell what the azimuth or the ASRAP is. So you'll notice these two sections down here are one color, and then these two are different. So because I said the wrap is kind of like a nautilus shell. So this line here is one end of the wrap, and this line is the other. However, the wrap goes like this. So when you're down here, you really don't have to worry about, you're not near the edge of the wrap. So if your source is down here, you don't even need to worry about it. So if I highlight over this, I can see that it is at an azimuth of 306. So I'm pretty sure this is the 450 and this is the 0. So it's obviously not anywhere near. If it was over here or something and it was giving you a number, then you'd have to worry. So it's not super intuitive. It's kind of even hard for me to explain how you tell if it's near the end of the wrap here. It's easier to just look at your actual as an L and see if it's near -90 or near 450, or ask the operator. But in a way you can kind of tell by this. It's just not super intuitive and kind of, And then when you click on real time, like I said, all those go away. You can't change these anymore. You can still load your own catalog, and if you've loaded the catalog, it'll stay. But now we can see where they currently are, and you can see what the telescope is actually doing. All right. And then we're going to talk. I will do talk and draw. So now, obviously, if, as Larry said, this is my soapbox. I'm sorry, because I was an operator. I have to get on my soapbox here for a minute. As Larry mentioned, talk and draw is how you're going to communicate with the operator. However, every time you log in, log out, send a message in this window, the operator hears a very annoying horn honk, which unfortunately, because none of you are going to be observing in the control room, you don't get to hear. But I usually make it go off while you're observing at least once, so you can hear the sound. So operators work 12-hour shifts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And now imagine, let's say you were sitting in the control room by yourself at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sorry, I'm going to use Will because he's here, and I'm going to use Jay as an example. Will logs in and starts talking to Jay in this window. Hey, Jay, how's your day? Jay says, fine, and go back and forth. And every single time that message is being sent, the operator is hearing honk, 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 honk. That's very annoying. Never have a private conversation. This window is for talking to the operator only. There is another way you can create down here. There's create a new group. You can just create a new group. And now the operator's not in here. You can go to edit membership. I'm going to add Will to it. Where is he? There he is. And so now if I type, only Will is going to see this message. The operator no longer hears the horn honk every time. Thank you, Will. And as you can see, you can still click back and forth. So if you're going to be talking to a collaborator or somebody, please open a separate chat. I always call it like the boy who cries wolf scenario. The operators are tuned to listen to that horn honk. And if it honks, they're going to turn around and look. But if you're having a private conversation and they've been hearing that horn honk for the last hour, they're just going to start to ignore it because they're going to assume you're talking. So when you actually need them, they might not be paying attention because they're tired of hearing that noise go off. So they've drowned it out. So you always want to make sure you have, if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, have it in a separate window. And again, the operators are tuned to hear this. It's just if you hear something over and over again, you're just going to tune it out. There is this button here called Get Attention. Never ever touch that button. That button is completely unnecessary. What it does is it just makes a horn honk to the operator. And there's never a reason for you to do that. You should always be typing. If you're typing to them, there's no reason. All it says is this person is trying to get your attention. And what you have to remember is, again, the operators are there for 12 hours in a room by themselves. They do have the right to get up and go to the bathroom and make their food. So if they don't answer you within like 2 seconds, it's probably the first thing they're going to do when they come back from the bathroom is they're going to check to see if there's a message. The first thing they're going to do is check. So you don't need to hit the get attention. If you've messaged them and they haven't answered you in like a minute or two, you also have to remember if there's a problem, they're probably trying to fix it. So they're not worried about necessarily typing to you. They're trying to get you back up and running. And some of the operators have been doing this for a very long time. Like some of them were still here when the 300-foot was fell and such, and they don't exactly type very fast. Some of them are hunt and peck typers, so it might take them a little bit of time to actually type. So don't and I would say the best observer is one who doesn't annoy the operator, and they will agree with me. Of course they will, but you don't want to make the operator, you don't want to annoy them, because they're your access to everything. And obviously they're not going to be vindictive or mean or anything if you annoy them. However, when it comes down to something like, I don't know, let's say you need 2 extra minutes and there's somebody logged in, obviously you ask that person if it's all right, but the operator can say, no, you can't have those 2 extra minutes because maybe you were mean to another observer, or you were, rude to them. They have the ability to say, no, oh, you need 2 extra minutes. Sorry, you can't have that. But if you're on their good side, they're more likely to be kind enough to be like, all right, you need like 2 minutes over. That's fine. I can work with that. And so there's this button here called auto raise as well. And because they're watching everything through VNC, or you're doing everything through VNC, VNC doesn't have sound. So you can't actually hear that horn honk sound yourself, but there is this auto raise button, which means if something is typed in talk and draw, it will pop up to the top of the window. I guess I should point out it is talk and draw. So there is a drawing function where you can actually draw a picture. And this won't be bothering the operator. You actually have to send the drawing to make this happen. So you actually you can play in here. And the story I'll just tell quick because I know I'm running out of time here is one night I was the operator. I had 2 breakthrough listen observers observing for me. One of them is a good friend. And all of a sudden I just see in this window, M-N-S, like just one letter. And I'm like, and it's going honk, honk, honk. And I'm thinking he's got to be doing it just to annoy me, right? Like he's just trying to be a pain. And I'm like, Dave, what are you doing? He messaged me back and says, open the whiteboard. So I opened the whiteboard, and here they were playing Hangman. Him and the 2, they were not in the same room. They were separated, and they were actually playing Hangman in the talk and draw windows, which I thought was really hilarious because then I proceeded to play with them. But you can actually use I think the word at the time was extraterrestrial or something, because clearly they were creative at that moment. So that's talk and draw. You'll see that again. And like I said, just be, conscientious when you're in here, because again, the operators are people and they're there for a long time and they're by themselves. It's, just don't try not to annoy them too much. All right. And so I think, so these are not really, so like Larry said, this doesn't create a configuration for you. All it really does is it lets you do it in real time. So like you can change if you wanted to change your mode, and it will tell you like, here's your channels. What mode did you just change to? So this isn't super useful in my opinion, because again, you shouldn't be manually changing things during your observations. You should always be changing it through your script via Astrid. And then the weather forecast is it's kind of useful. I'm not super intuitive about this. I'm not, yeah, I don't really want to go through it because I'm not entirely sure if I'd be giving you accurate information on that. But you can always use the high frequency weather that I think Dave talked about it earlier, and it's in the DSS. There's also, I do cheat, there is one other cheat I use, the breakthrough listen backend, which you'll never use unless you do. I think we have one breakthrough listen person. And you can tell everybody I talk about it's not a cheat for them, but I cheat using their system. There's this thing here called 24-hour forecast. And if you click on it, it shows you for like pretty much most receivers or whatever is selected up here, it shows you the value for like the next 24 hours. And you want that value, if the value is closer to 1, that means that the weather is good for that receiver. So like these, obviously it's saying right now, using the KFPA is not the best option, but you could use L-band, which they are, and L-band has perfect weather. So you want that number to be closer to 1. So sometimes if I'm looking, I'll just kind of sneak into the breakthrough listen backend and just kind of check their 24-hour forecast, because I really like the way well, now he's retired, Ron Madalena created all that stuff, and I think that he did that was a really neat app that he created there. So the last thing I'm going to show you is the CLEO Container. So this is the thing I was telling you about that lets you open multiple apps in one window. So you can open, let's see, if you wanted to open, we're not going to open. So you can open your sky view. And I guess I didn't mention, some apps you can't resize, and I'm not entirely sure why, but once you put them in the CLEO Container, you can resize everything. And so then all you have to do is open, let's see, nope, not that, sorry, force of habit. We'll just open the weather. Some apps will not open in this. Like I'm pretty sure Talk and Draw will open in here, but if you try to open like the antenna control screen, that won't open in here, it opens separately. But now you can see we have, and like when I do radar runs, I always open the converter rack as well. So you can see you can have multiple things open here. I just don't want to open Talk and Draw again because I don't want it to honk at the operator. And so now I have pretty much everything open that I need within CLEO, except for, again, I wouldn't put the status window in here. And I can click through that and it's not taking up my entire field of view. And then you can just quit that. And it will ask you if you're sure you want to quit, because it's going to close all of those. And I'm pretty sure that is it. All right, do I have, oh, I see something. Oh, I see a chat thingy. Ooh, haha, I figured it out. Amber, do we also use CLEO for monitoring the RF spectrum? So no, you won't use this to look at any data or anything like that. That's going to be Astrid and GBT IDL. There's really no way to see your data within CLEO. You can just see the power levels of the system and stuff like that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Is there any other questions? Oh, I guess now you can all see. I can stop sharing my screen now. But again, like I said, just open CLEO. You can open CLEO. I guess the last thing I can show real quick is that, like, if you wanted to quickly open, I have to remember if Skyview is the first word or not. Nope. Okay. So it's CLEO and it's scheduler. I have to be able to spell first. What? I can't spell, as I just pointed out. So you can actually type in and it will open an individual app as well. You just have to know what the keyword is to open that app. As you could clearly tell, I'm not super great at that. It's easier for me to just open the CLEO launcher and go from there. All right, I finished with 1 minute. We'll go.
Perfect timing. Any final questions for Amber? She will also stick around in the next break if you have any more CLEO specific questions. Hearing none, Andrew, go ahead and start sharing your screen. Let me stop one recording.